In the heart of the rugged Pacific coast, where the fog rolls in like a theatrical curtain obscuring opulence and secrets, stands an architectural marvel atop what the Spanish once called La Cuesta Encantada, the Enchanted Hill. Hearst Castle is not merely a residence, it is a declaration, a personal kingdom erected by the unyielding will and colossal fortune of William Randolph Hearst, the media mogul whose name became synonymous with the creation and destruction of American myths. But behind the magnificent facade and the sweeping, manicured gardens lies a deeper story of expenditures beyond measure, personal struggles, and a historical legacy entangled in controversies of ownership and the sheer dispersal of wealth. The castle is not just a repository of priceless artifacts scavenged from ancient civilizations. It is a monument to an age where wealth bought not only power, but also beauty, and fleetingly, a sense of immortality. The true narrative begins with William's father, George Hearst, a man who seemed born with a pickaxe in his hand, mining the vast silver and gold from the Comstock Lode and Homestake mines. He amassed a stupendous fortune, a solid foundation that William Randolph would take and launch into his own sprawling media empire. George purchased this sprawling 40,000-acre tract, which became the family's rustic retreat, a simple campground from which William, or Billy as his parents called him, developed a profound and possessive love for this wild, inspiring landscape. When George died in 1891, leaving William a burgeoning empire, the son conceived a vision that transcended the rustic simplicity of the old campsites. His vision was an architectural masterpiece that would encapsulate the European dream and the grandeur of Rome, yet it had to be situated on the very Californian soil he adored. It was this ambition that led him to Julia Morgan, a pioneering architect who had graduated with honors from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, a woman with the rigorous engineering capability and artistic sensibility to translate Hearst's most fantastic ideas into solid reality. The collaboration between the visionary media tycoon and the meticulous, pragmatic female architect was a partnership that spanned 28 years, a creative odyssey that began in 1919. Hearst initially requested merely something simple, a comfortable camp where he could host guests. However, Hearst's definition of simple quickly ballooned into a dramatic, ceaseless construction project that eventually encompassed 165 rooms, a host of luxurious guest houses, 2 magnificent swimming pools, the indoor Roman pool and the outdoor Neptune pool, and 127 acres of elaborately designed gardens. Morgan skillfully orchestrated a synthesis of historical styles, from Gothic to Spanish Renaissance, arranged to showcase Hearst's immense collection of antiques and art, a treasury whose provenance and acquisition legality have long been subjects of intense and sustained controversy. Hearst's collecting frenzy is central to this story, an obsession that transgressed ethical and financial borders. His agents and buyers were tasked with scouring the globe, stripping decaying churches, monasteries, and palaces across Europe for their carved ceilings, stone sculptures, and treasured tapestries. These items were then disassembled, crated, and shipped to California, where Morgan and her team of artisans had to painstakingly reassemble them, integrating historical relics into a modern structure in a manner that sometimes created a jarring pastiche of styles and eras. This extravagance, financed by the seemingly endless cash flow from Hearst's newspaper empire, created an unprecedented living and entertaining environment where film stars, politicians, and cultural figures congregated, living within an impenetrable bubble of power and wealth. The Roaring '20s and the early '30s saw Hearst Castle, or the Ranch as his owner preferred to call it, transformed into the American analog of the great European estates, but with a distinctly Californian flourish of movie star glamour and political gravitas. It was here, in this secluded, opulent world, that William Randolph Hearst attempted to merge his life's disparate threats, his vast media empire, his complex domestic situation, and his almost maniacal desire to surround himself with beauty and history. His life was rigidly compartmentalized. While his wife Millicent remained in New York, maintaining social appearances, the true mistress of the castle and of Hearst's later life was Marion Davies, the vibrant, talented actress whose career he zealously championed and whose presence filled the lonely halls with light. The gatherings at San Simeon were legendary, drawing a rotating cast of the era's most significant figures, from Charlie Chaplin and Greta Garbo to Winston Churchill and President Calvin Coolidge. These lavish house parties were meticulously orchestrated affairs, where the guests were expected to adhere to a strict social code, yet they were immersed in an environment of unimaginable physical extravagance. Imagine stepping into the Casa Grande, the main residence, and finding yourself under a Spanish choir stall ceiling that had once sheltered monks in a European monastery, now juxtaposed with the flickering light of a projection room showing the latest Hollywood feature. The tension inherent in this fusion between the authentic, revered history of the artifacts and the ephemeral, manufactured glamour of Hollywood is key to understanding the castle's hidden cost. Hearst wasn't just building a house, he was creating a stage for his own historical importance, using genuine antiquity as the backdrop for his modern, often sensational power.
Yet this relentless pursuit of collecting and constructing came at a staggering financial and eventually personal price. Hearst's collecting fever was voracious, exceeding even the colossal cash flows generated by his newspaper and magazine holdings. He was known for acquiring entire structures, like the 12th century Spanish monastery of Santa Maria de Ovila, which was painstakingly dismantled stone by stone and shipped across the Atlantic, only to sit for decades in crates at San Simeon due to a lack of funds to reassemble it, a powerful symbol of his overreach. The total expenditure on the castle and its contents became the subject of horrified whispers in financial circles, especially as the Great Depression began to tighten its grip on the nation. The critical turning point came in 1937. As the Depression deepened, the circulation of Hearst's newspapers plummeted, and the advertising revenue that fueled his extravagant lifestyle dried up almost completely. The edifice upon which La Cuesta Encantada was built began to crumble. Facing staggering debts that mounted into the millions, a truly astronomical figure for the time, Hearst's empire was placed into receivership. This man, who had dominated American media and lived like European royalty, suddenly found himself under the strict control of a financial management committee. His first and most painful mandate from the receivers was the immediate cessation of all construction at Hearst Castle and the liquidation of a massive portion of his collected treasures, a painful process that saw priceless art objects scattered to auction houses across the globe, ripping the soul out of the collection he had spent a lifetime amassing. The finished castle, though majestic, remains permanently unfinished, a monument to a dream cut short by economic reality, a frozen frame in time that eloquently narrates the sudden, sharp limit of even the most immense personal wealth. The years following the 1937 financial crisis marked a profound shift in the life of William Randolph Hearst and the fate of his castle. Construction ceased abruptly, leaving certain areas, particularly the third floor of the Casa Grande and various planned guest houses, in a state of permanent incompletion. The sudden halt did more than just stop the hammers and trowels. It sealed the property in a specific historical moment, forever documenting the point at which aspiration collided with economic reality. For the first time, Hearst was forced to confront the limits of his own omnipotence. While he continued to live at the ranch with Mary and Davies, the vibrant social life began to wane. The grand parties became less frequent, replaced by the somber presence of the Financial Managing Committee, who scrutinized every expenditure. Crucially, the liquidation process that stripped away some of the most spectacular parts of his collection began to reveal the controversial origins of many artifacts. While Hearst genuinely loved history and art, his method of acquisition often bordered on and sometimes crossed into what today would be considered cultural looting. The sheer volume of material required by the castle's design, from entire ceilings and frescoes to thousands of ceramic tiles, meant that his agents operated on a scale that disrupted archaeological sites and historic structures across Europe, particularly in Spain and Italy. The debate over whether Hearst was a preserver of architectural history, saving artifacts from pay, or simply a wealthy plunderer, extracting cultural heritage for private consumption, remains a divisive aspect of his legacy. This debate is the core of the castle's hidden cost, the ethical price paid for its extravagant beauty. In the early 1940s, Hearst's health began to decline. The isolation of San Simeon, which he had once cherished, became a burden as his need for specialized medical care increased. In 1947, he was forced to leave La Cuesta Encantada for the last time, seeking treatment in Los Angeles. The departure was quiet, unceremonious, and final. He never returned to the castle he had spent nearly 3 decades building. The massive palatial estate, which had been the nexus of his power, his passions, and his collections, was suddenly abandoned by his creator. The staff remained for a time, maintaining the grounds and the empty halls, but the essential spirit of the place, the commanding presence of the chief, was gone. Hearst died in 1951, but the castle's fate remained uncertain for several years. The Hearst Corporation, inheriting the property, found the estate to be an enormous financial drain. The operational costs were astronomical, and the corporation had no desire to maintain such a grand private museum. The decision was ultimately made to donate the castle and surrounding lands to the state of California, a move carefully calculated to relieve the corporation of tax burdens and maintenance costs while preserving the legacy of William Randolph Hearst. The transfer was made in 1957, and thus a private kingdom built on a mountainous fortune was transformed into a public trust. However, the donation came with a significant caveat. The corporation retained ownership of the vast surrounding ranch land, a separation that would later become a source of ongoing legal and conservation debates regarding public access and environmental protection in the coastal region. The private cost of construction now morphed into the public cost of preservation, maintenance, and interpretation. The transformation of Hearst Castle from a private residence to a public museum marked the beginning of its second and perhaps most complex life. Opening its doors to the public in 1958, the castle immediately became one of California's most popular destinations, drawing millions who were eager to peer behind the velvet rope of extreme wealth. The state of California, through its Parks Department, was tasked with the immense responsibility of preserving a structure and collection that were never intended for public use or the rigors of mass tourism. This stewardship created a paradoxical situation. A space designed for exclusivity was now dedicated to mass accessibility, fundamentally altering the atmosphere and conservation requirements of La Cuesta Encantada. The challenges of maintenance quickly became apparent. The sheer size of the property, combined with its elaborate, imported, and often fragile materials, demanded a perpetual multi-million-dollar budget for upkeep. The stunning Neptune pool, for instance, a centerpiece of the grounds, has suffered numerous structural issues over the decades, requiring massive multi-year restoration projects due to leaks, seismic activity, and the corrosive effect of the elements. Similarly, the structural integrity of the Casa Grande itself, built using innovative but complex techniques to incorporate ancient stone, requires constant monitoring and conservation work to mitigate the inevitable effects of age and the Central Coast climate. The price of this private fantasy is an ongoing, escalating cost that diverts significant public funds, a reality that continually fuels debate over whether the castle is a treasured asset or a fiscal burden. Moreover, the ethical debates surrounding the collection have intensified over time. As global standards regarding cultural heritage shifted, the legitimacy of Hearst's acquisitions came under greater scrutiny. In recent years, specific pieces within the collection have been identified as having questionable provenance, leading to demands for repatriation. For example, the collection included Roman artifacts and ancient antiquities whose removal from their original context, though perhaps legal at the time, is now viewed as an undeniable form of cultural loss for their native countries. The castle therefore serves as a prominent, if unwitting, participant in the modern discourse on cultural restitution, carrying the heavy historical and